to this Imagine Spaces workshop. Kirsty and I have done bits and pieces together for some time, although we used to teach at the university together, and now I'm retired and she's mostly down at Oxford. And so poor us, we are slightly deprived. But I was also going to say, I want to introduce Jean Duncan, who was a resident artist in the geography department at the university, and she has done some lovely work, and I've done some work with her also at the Dundee International Women's Centre. So it's lovely to have colleagues to help carry an event like this. The morning is going to be structured like this. Kirsty will talk about her book and the short story that once I get her to come here and sit down. Kirsty will talk about the short story and the book. Come up here, Kirsty. And I will just go over there and film, and we'll take some responses to that after she reads and chats about her book. I also need to say to everyone, if you want to stay for lunch, stick up your hands. I'll count out who wants to stay for lunch, and I'll book a table at the Larick Cafe. So if I could have a show of hands if you want to stay for lunch, I'll just count the number of people who are staying. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and we'll be in the cafe for 3 of us. So I'll book a table for 10 now. And Kirsty,
well, I will do that.
Yeah, okay, that'd be lovely. Kirsty and I run United Spaces. Some of you know us because you've been ex-students and we've been working with you, and you've been writing for us for some time. So we're really pleased to see you. I can count on my hand the number of faces I actually know, but some of you we haven't seen, and we will only be meeting for the first time. So we're really pleased to have you here. Now, I don't really need to introduce Kirsty, I don't think, because she's very well known. I suppose the book that everyone knows you for is The Big Music,
okay,
which is the biggest, which is a lovely Scottish book set in the Highlands. But she's also a short story writer from Pretty Ugly, the short story collection that are books to buy if you would like to buy them at the end of the session. She's also an essayist, and I sometimes write with her, and we're writing a book together at the moment. So I'm really pleased again to be inviting you here. Back to Dundee, where you don't come.
It's also lovely for Gail and I to be together, because this is also an Imagine Spaces event, and we'll talk about that as the morning goes on, because those of you we don't know, we would love to get to know, and to encourage you to be part of our Imagine Spaces adventure, which is a kind of online centre, isn't it, Gail, for us to talk about and think about ways of thinking on the page. Because that is the way that Gail and I define essays, not the things that we all do when we're at school or university that come with assessments and deadlines, but rather a wonderful creative space in which we can develop as imaginative and intellectual and ethical people. So yeah, we'd love you to be part of our Imagine Spaces adventure. We can talk about that a bit more as the morning goes on.
Towards the end of the session.
Yeah.
And for those of you who don't know the website, it's Imagine Spaces, oneword.org. It's really easy to remember.
And in fact, Gail, we must get more of those postcards, because I've just given out some pretty ugly postcards, but it would be great to have more of those to give out, because we would love to encourage you to, participate by making work and sending it in to us, and we do have spaces for publishing new writing after special events like this.
And I'm also going to say, as part of the remit for Book Week Scotland, I have to record this particular event. I'm mostly only going to record Kirsty speaking about the book and maybe some of the discussion there. And when the workshop happens, we'll just take photographs. And if you don't want to be recorded, don't want your work to be photographed for the actual event, which we will upload on our website, please come and see me about that. Housekeeping, the actual toilets are all the way past the cafe on your right, and then go down there's a little corridor going down on the left, so the toilets are over there that way. But okay, let's start.
Well, thanks. Well, thanks, Gail. And first of all, can I say, is it okay that I'm putting all my kit on this ravishing item of clothing that is sitting here on the table, that belonged to Gail's mother, and that Gail has inherited, and I think it's actually really awful that I do have all this stuff. So let's just do this. Because we're going to be talking about the kind of presence of clothing in our lives as a kind of creative theme for today. And as Gail said, we'll be using one of the stories. I mean, what is it about handling the clothing of those we've loved who have died that is so powerful? Like, what is that all about? I want you to put that into your kind of subconscious as we're working and thinking and making today. And anyway, we have this beautiful piece of clothing here, so I'm just going to move that now. And now I can put my kit back. Gorgeous to be here, really lovely to be with Gail, all these other old friends from writing pasts and present, and to be meeting new friends. So yes, I'm Kirsty Gunn. I'm a writer, as Gail said, write all kinds of stuff. I've been writing and publishing for a very, very long time, and this latest collection of short stories is very, very, very tricky. It's called Pretty Ugly, and in a way, the title is a description. You know, what it says on the tin describes the contents. So what we've got in this collection of short stories are pieces about very, very tricky people, like quite ugly, some of them, with some ugly ideas about the world. There's also some really lovely people in the stories. There's champagne and there's kittens, but there's also very, very dark stuff going on. So the stories contain both of these elements that I'm asking the reader to kind of keep in their heads at the same time. There's a word I've been banging on to a lot about everybody, to everybody recently, and this word is heuristic, and the word means to hold two opposite ideas in one's head at the same time, and to use that opposition as a way of developing thinking and imagination and our sort of sense of ourselves in the world. It seems to me to be nothing more deadly and dangerous and bad for us than to be sitting with one received idea after another and never to be contesting it. The poet Mark Doty talks about be careful of what you're reading, because if you're not paying attention to what you're reading, someone else is. And by that he means the advertisers, the money makers, those who want to reduce us to little worker bees who do nothing more than work and consume. Come on in, nice to see you. This is Ellie with blonde hair, who I haven't seen for a long time. So nice to have everybody with us. Okay, so we're talking about this idea of keeping these two things moving and alive in our heads at the same time. The stories themselves are organised in such a way that you never quite know what's coming next. It strikes me that a lot of short story collections are what I might call a self-enclosed machine. They just turn over and over and over, and there's a similarity about them, there's a sense of continuity about them. I guess what I was wanting to do was shove some stuff into the machine and kind of jam it and make it do other things and kind of go off into crazy directions. So you read one story and you think, oh crikey, this is what this collection is about. And then you read the next, so it's altogether different. And so on and so on. The writer Adam Mars-Jones, writer I admire very much, very kindly supplied a cover line for this edition, and then he said something like, I'm shuffling the pack, you never quite know what's going to come up next. Now in a way, that process of surprise and change and being open and alert to the next thing has been a feature of my writing life ever since I started publishing. My very first novel, Rain, which came out, it's so long ago, 94 I think it was, like 100 years ago, was quite a success, I suppose. It was made into a movie and it won some award at Cannes. I don't know, I never saw the film, but it was translated all around the world and was made into theatre and dance and all the rest of my publishers were very excited and they thought, oh great, could the next book be another book like that, please? And the next book was completely different. And I've gone on and I've done that all through my publishing and writing life. So any of you who want to be really, really successful and make tons of money and sell loads of books. Don't listen to a thing I say, because I'm married to a publisher, and he knows and has told me over and over again how I do myself a disservice with every single book, because I lose my past readership. Gail just mentioned my Highland novel, The Big Music, which is like this, and takes as its theme pibroch, which is the very beautiful music of the Highland pipes, and it's a southern novel, and it's about history and family and this beautiful music. And with that novel, I gained a whole fresh readership. People writing to me from all over the world about Scotland and about the Highlands and about music and about Highland culture. And then what did I do? The next book I wrote, the next novel, was called Caroline's Bikini. And it was set in London, and it was full of some pretty awful rich people, but also some quite nice people. But it was like, it could not have been more different. It was full of cocktails and bars, and it was also a story about unrequited love and my own love letter to Muriel Spark. And in fact, while the novel seems to be like a very London novel, a very West London novel, in fact, it's actually very Scottish. Scotland runs through it like an underground river. But this is an example of how everything I'm doing is kind of tricky. So here we are with this collection, which is trickiness personified. And with Jean and Gail, we're going to have an amazing morning of using one of the short stories in here, because this is Book Week Scotland, and so we're using fiction and reading as part of everything that we do in our creative and intellectual lives. I'm going to take a story from this, and I'm going to read some of that story, maybe all if I have time, but I think, Gail, my timings are such that I'm just going to read for a few minutes.
Okay, and there is a photocopy of the first 2 pages.
Oh yeah, well should we have, no, maybe we'll do that later when we get to the creative bit. So what we're going to be doing is, I'm going to read from the story a bit, and we're going to talk about some of the themes and ideas that arise in that story. And then I've got a creative writing workshop for you all to participate in by way of reaction to some of the ideas that I'm hoping this story is going to engender. And we'll work on that, and there'll be a coffee break in which you can finish those pieces of writing, at which point we're going to hand on to Jean and the amazing creative, artistic, make and do element of the morning, but we'll move on to that later. So for now, yes, let me read to you from a story in here called Mirror, Mirror. Does anyone have any questions just before I kick off with the reading? Anything I need to clarify or talk more about? Is that all pretty clear? Good, okay. So Gail, if I kind of 10 minutes max, is that a good kind of sense of timing? We'll see how we get on. Mirror, mirror. A woman, a certain kind of woman, loves a red dress. She seizes upon it. She is not afraid. She selects the dress from rack upon rack of dresses, takes it up in her hands and her arms, tries it on, and keeps that dress for her own. This woman, this certain kind of woman, knows how the dress will change her when she wears it, and she feels the change now as she tries it on, knows the dress already owns her, loves her, will take her out to places she may never have been to, or to places with which she is familiar, but the dress makes it different for her to be there. Now, in the dress, she's the person she's always believed herself to be. The dress knows all this, of course, though it doesn't show it. She just hangs there on the rack while she's waiting. She's a dress. But, like the woman herself, the dress is capable of anything, everything. And the woman knows this when she sees herself in it for the first time. When she sees herself so fully clothed. Yes, she says to herself in the mirror then, in the privacy of the changing room, when the sales assistant is not looking. Yes, to the dress. This, she says, And she smoothed her hands down her front, across her belly, down her back, down her hips, her thighs, and this. She extends her neck, puts back her shoulders that she might put forward her breasts. Oh yes, she says again, as though speaking to herself in the mirror, as though speaking to the dress itself in the mirror's glass. All this, she says, into the glass. I'll take it. And the shop assistant nods in answer. Oh yes, she echoes, in a soft grey echo, a soft grey figure herself in the reflection in the glass. And so the woman, this certain kind of living, breathing woman, takes up the dress now and wears it for her lovers, for her friends, for men, for women, for all the old flames and the new, for all the girls and boys who may see her, all the old ladies and all the old men, the women and the gentlemen of the opera and the ballet, of the dinner parties and the salons and the cocktail bars and the balls, all who might ever see her out there in the world, in the red dress. This is me here before you, she seems to be saying to them all, as she feels herself grow tall, elongated, balletic, under their accumulating gaze. This dress, she is me, she says, and she takes the young boy by the arm and makes him dance. Oh yes, he says, like all the others. Oh yes, they turn to her and sigh. Years pass. The dress continues. She takes the woman up, takes her out, and now she wears her colour loud and now quiet. She's high, now low, now rich and proud and glittering, and now quite down and dirty, ragged in the rainy street. The dress, always lovely, always just the same. Oh, this old thing, the woman says, as though she does not care. I've had this old thing for years, and brushes an imaginary mark from the shoulder of the dress, from the thin strap of the shoulder there. But still you look incredible, they say. The people, all her friends, come on in, it's nice to have you. But still you look incredible, they say. The people, all her friends, you look the same, as though you've never changed. It's the dress, she answers in reply, spinning around to show the cut of it, the folds, to staunch their wonder at her camouflage, to hide their open gaze. There's nothing I can do that might spoil it, she says. Drunk on my wedding night, I spilled things down its front, and still it cleaned like new. See? She spins and turns. You see, she says, it's like that night never happened. The dress had just cleaned itself. How it cleaned and it cleaned. The dress is capable of that, she goes on. Regeneration, I suppose. Reinvention, too. I've been tall like a Tartar sometimes in this dress, or I've been tiny as a child, like a virgin or a little girl. I've lost weight and was ill, and I was surly and yellow, and still this dress held me, would hold me. So I've always worn it, worn her, this old thing. In sickness or in health, I'm married, in love, in lust, unloved and loved again, worn. I carried my daughter's unborn body beneath this dress, had her sitting on my crimson knee. When she was an infant, she played amongst the pleats and fall of this dress as though it were a curtain or a stage. And when she was older, I remember, yes, those around her asked, you remember, I found her dressed up one day in this same dress, found her dressed up in my dress herself and standing there before the mirror. You, take that off now, I screamed. It's not yours, it's mine. You, but I'm being you, Mummy, my daughter said. She was looking at herself, you see, admiring herself so wondrously in the glass. My daughter, my little girl. Oh yes, people say. Another echo of the endless confirmation, always attracted by the dress, a red dress. They do that, children, girls, the people say. They want to be their mother, wear their mother's things. Look, I am you, is what the children say. Oh no, says the woman. Oh yes, they reply. So years go by the same and the dress still lives, yet less worn out these days, or in, less taken, chosen. The dress must wait, less used, she hangs, has hung. Not unloved and not forgotten, still, she doesn't go out now, the woman, the mother, not like before, not like she used to. And her daughter grows, is growing, taller, stronger. Oh, this old thing, the woman hears, her own voice now like an echo, and she hears it, her past self speaking to herself as she stands now before the mirror, holding before her the red dress, to see her past self in the distance there, someplace way beyond the dress, beyond the glasses of champagne, the mirror's depths and frame, past looks and glances, food and fingers, touches and kisses. Oh, that old thing. And the girl, her daughter, comes into the room and finds her there, the red dress. To her mother says, give it to me, and takes it. So I'm going to stop there, the story goes on, but quickly, like without even thinking too much, can you just scribble down on your pieces of paper some of your thoughts and reactions to the story? It doesn't even need to be about the story, it just can be about how the story makes you feel or what it reminds you of. Anything at all. There's no right or wrong. Okay, so that's just some other kind of initial reactions and thoughts there. And now I'm going to invite Gail to speak for a little about, what do you call it, Gail? Mirror theory. And essaying.
I'd start with a short story, I suppose, first of all, which is a reaction to the story. And first of all, I need to say that I really like that it's not a full-blown Gothic. It just troubles you. It introduces some of the ideas about otherness, about how you see yourself slightly at a slant, what you pass on, what you don't pass on, complicated relationships between mother and daughter, for one, but it's not a full-blown horror story. And I think I need to say that straight away, because it's so very easy to make it a full-blown horror story. I also like the fact that the narrator stacks into the story, so it's not simply a realistic rendering of the story itself. So the narrator tells, I see her other. The I comes in the story that's narrating it. And again, I think that's great, because it just troubles the story and doesn't let you settle. The other thing I think is wonderful for my own particular interest, which is about mirrors and about otherness and how you might see yourself at a slight askew slant, so you come to yourself in a slightly different way. It's a sense of the timeline of selves in there. The young woman who wears the dress, who then grows up, and there's a lovely little line that says her past self speaking to herself as she stands now before the mirror, holding the red dress, and all the different selves there are. So for me, the story dissolves that sense of self, because what you see in the mirror, you take for granted as yourself, but yet the story doesn't do that. And I think that's really important. And so I've actually put two little excerpts, one from Foucault, who obviously those of us who work at universities can't get away from, in his very famous essay called Of Other Spaces, in which he talks about the mirror as in some ways giving you, you don't need to know much about Foucault, but what I really like from this particular excerpt is the mirror functions as a way, again, of reminding you that the self is not completely whole and coherent, that sometimes seeing yourself as someone other disrupts your sense of subjectivity, your certainty of who you are. And that troubling moment is so very important, I think. And that's why mirrors are in lots of horror stories in the same kind of way. The other little thing is from Sabine Bonnet, which is a mirror, a history. Again, kind of cements the idea of reflection as creating that little tiny gap between what you see and what isn't really real, and what actually in some ways reveals more of you than you really know. And again, that little gap between the mirror that reflects you but in reverse, again allows something else to happen in these particular scenarios. So I like the sense of the mirror as a way of, in some ways, troubling what is certainly, the certainty that is you, if you like, when you see yourself reflected in the mirror.
Fabulous. And I love the way, Gail, your remarks make us think about, what our expectations are when we're reading fiction. Because there's so much about the way fiction is marketed to us that is about certainties. I'm always laughing, even at this way that the first thing someone will say when they're reading a book is, what is it about? As though it can be answered that simply, as though everything is as simple as that. As though we ourselves were simple, as though we ourselves are some kind of story that has this neat beginning, middle, and ending that can all be tied up in such a way as to make sense. Whereas we all know that life is erratic and crazy and full of things that just happen, that have no rhyme or reason to them. Yes, there are occasionally little moments when you have your kind of, aha. But generally, it's all crazy, and then one day suddenly it's over. Bang! So this whole idea that, we're disrupting that singularity of self, and interestingly, I was at an event last night for this book, and my chair made this remark, and I've never thought about this before. He said, in fact, in all of your books, there are mirrors. In all of your books, there are reflections. In Caroline's bikini, there's the reflection of the swimming pool.
And in the swimming pool, there is a reflection of
the... So I just think this idea that, as Gail said, I'm not interested in Gothic, I'm not interested in horror stories, I'm not interested in any kind of genre. I'm just interested in making things new in a way that continue to excite me and keep me engaged in asking questions. I love the thing that the New Zealand short story writer Catherine Mansfield says about fiction. She says it's not a question of answering any questions, it's a question of putting the question. It's the whole point is to ask the questions. So, yeah, it's never been horror, Gothic, or any genre at play, but I've always loved playing with those genres. And as I say, this idea of a kind of disruption to make things more exciting. We're now going to work on a little creative piece, and later in that writing we're going to have the opportunity to read over more carefully the Foucault extract in particular, which I myself care for more than the second. I find the second one quite hard to understand. And like a lot of theory, when I come across theory, I'm just thinking, like Cleopatra to Antony, be more plain. It's like, what is this actually saying? I find it really confusing. So by the way, when you read this and you feel confused like I do, that's okay too, and you can make that part of your reaction. Again, Imagine Spaces is all about this kind of stuff.
It is all about asking questions, isn't it? Yeah.
And being uncertain, and being kind of thrilled by that uncertainty, because that's the opportunity at which you get to think for yourself.
Yes, I mean, a lot of us work as academics, and it's always about knowing exactly what it is you want to pass on, or what the answer to the question is. And I quite like what we're trying to do here, which is to pose the question and not being able to answer it directly, or being able to think about it and seeing where that thinking goes. And in thinking about it, we write about it, and the writing also takes us into different places. I used to think as an academic, that you needed to be an expert in the event, but you actually don't need to be an expert in the event. You need to see where the writing as a medium takes you
Totally. And though Jean is sitting here like a beautiful silent emblem in the centre of our conversation, Jean is nevertheless going to be exploring the same kinds of ideas in fine art practice. That it's about making and seeing, and it doesn't have to be perfect. Like there's no right or wrong. So the whole morning that we're going to be working and thinking together is all about, let's just give it a go and see what happens. So, okay, the first part of our exercise, and the way that we work, for those of you who don't know Gail and me and our processes, we love you to work quickly without thinking, get stuff down on the page, and then we give you a bit of time later to go over what you've done and kind of fiddle with it a bit and try and read your own writing and make any changes. But that first draft, we're very keen on you just getting it down and not worrying about it or not even thinking about it, just getting it down on the page. So, for the first 5 minutes, this is just the first part of your exercise. Our theme, as Gail says, is mirroring, is clothing, is the idea of a self-containing multiple selves. So, I want you to think about an article of clothing that you love or have loved. So something that's very, very special to you, either now or has been. Think about it. And then I want you to imagine yourself in that article and looking into the mirror and ask yourself the question, what do I see here in the mirror? Who am I seeing? What kind of thing is this I'm seeing? What kind of article of clothing is it? I want this piece of writing to be entirely descriptive. I don't want you to think about what you think about it. I just want you to write about what you see in the mirror. So it's close description, a lot of detail. Who is that in the mirror, in that item of clothing that you're going to describe? What is it? Who and what? So take 5 minutes and scribble everything you can down in response to that, and then I'll give you a few more minutes to go back over what you've done. So from now, 5 minutes, and if you could just have quiet, please, while everyone does that scribbling and works away. From now.